Hello, everyone. Today is May 29th, 2023. My guest today is Michael Carroll. Michael is my good friend. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Michael.
Thanks for having me, Krush.
We were talking about you deleted Twitter and TikTok from your phone and a few months ago, and you're not looking back.
Yeah, I deleted it in March. Lexi and I were talking about going on like a social media cleanse, and then I just hadn't really found a need or like a reason to re-download it, and I feel like I'm a lot more disconnected, which is nice. So I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Like I feel like it eliminates a lot of noise, if that makes sense. Like a lot of the stuff that everybody else thinks is super important that's not really that important, like you don't really need to know about, which I kind of enjoy. I don't know how to explain it, but it's been something that I've liked not having or feeling as connected to everything.
Yes, absolutely. I understand. And especially at the rates which people who have them on their phones check these platforms. Like when I had Instagram on my phone, I literally would check it like maybe, I don't know how many times. I could probably check on like the metrics for my phone, but I'm guessing over 50 times a day, just opening the Instagram app and checking it out, and like it's the same thing it was 20 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago. And on the phone it's really drag, and I get, like you said, it creates a lot of noise, and that, not much on Instagram for me actually results in something that I find meaningful and valuable.
So not much for you, meaning you don't think that there's a lot of value to it, or what do you mean?
When I surf it, but when I surf it a lot past a certain amount, maybe more than like 10 minutes a day, I find it to be to have lost to have diminishing returns. And that's how most social media is. And being able to cap it at something like 10 minutes, which I already today, within an hour of maybe 2 hours of being awake, past 10 minutes of Instagram use today. But I feel like there's a diminishing returns on that. So like, say you're able to cap it at 10 minutes every day, then like it's worth your time. It's good.
Yeah.
And then most people do not, these people who use Instagram do not cap it at 10 minutes a day. It's more like 2+ hours a day.
Easy. Yeah. I also think like I don't know about Instagram because I haven't had Instagram in a while, but I think like Twitter and TikTok, they do a really good job of like forcing you in there and keeping you in their the platform. Like there's so many different searches going on and things trending that you want to click on, and this person posted and then this person liked this post, and it's just like it's very easy. And TikTok too, because you could just keep swiping and you get just lost. And I will say TikTok is very like, for the most part, dependent upon what you're looking at, it's informational. Like there's a lot of good stuff on there. Like Lexi's using it a lot for Greece and like planning for the Greece trip, all that stuff. So like there's a lot of really good stuff on there, don't get me wrong, but it's also very easy to get sucked down a rabbit hole of like nonsense that will just waste your time. And then it makes me think like we spend so much of our time like looking at our boxes on our phone and then TVs as well. It's like I feel like people used to have so much more conversation. And I feel like a lot of that's lost because of us staring at boxes and looking down on our phone. Even like when you look at going to our elevator at our building, like nobody really wants to speak to you, and they just like are looking at their phone and looking down and like avoiding eye contact. And it's just kind of like the impersonal part of it. I feel like that's part of I don't know. It was a very interesting observation that I've kind of noticed over the last couple of months or so.
Yes, I agree. And for me, that like the people you talk to being in a box is a little bit, it's definitely got pros and cons.
Mhm.
And for one pro, it's that like Stanford and MIT used to be like the hubs, maybe like Caltech or something, these hubs of like really smart people that if they wanted to do something amazing, they'd have to go to that campus and collaborate with those people. And like now you don't have to do that. Now you can go to this box in your stay in your place. I don't want to leave San Diego, and like there isn't a huge like kind of tech startup scene here. There is one, but it's not like those other places. So it's been helpful, but at the same time, there is this whole other dichotomy to it where like dating apps, dating apps are crazy. And you know, like what happens when someone starts like instead of going out into social scenarios where they might meet a potential significant other and they start like just spending most of their day surfing dating apps instead and doing things that would, you know, draw them away from being in these more social scenes
Yeah.
where they would be able to meet someone, maybe not their partner, but just someone else possibly. Like you go to that place and you might meet someone you don't expect versus like a dating app where there's very little gratification because you're not actually meeting anyone or interacting with humans.
Well, that and I don't know. I don't know. I think it was that book I was talking about earlier, the 8 Rules of Love. They're talking about that, the dating app part in that book, and they're talking about how in a dating app, everybody puts what they want you to see out to the world. So you don't really like, it could be a whole fabrication of that person. So you don't really know who you're meeting until you actually meet that person, anyways, which is, I don't know, also very interesting. Which is not a bad or a good thing. So I think there's a good way to meet people. But then if you try to put up or keep that front on, like, let me take a step back. This one guy in that book was talking about how he, to his therapist, talking about how got girls only like me because I have money. And then he's like, okay, well, look at your dating app profile. You have pictures of sports cars, you have pictures of yachts, you have all these like fancy things in your bio. Like, what, of course you're going to attract that. Like, if you want people to see you for who you are, like, then put out the authentic you and not just what you want people to see. I think that was a really interesting way to like break it down and think about it. But I don't know. Anyways, I think yeah, dating apps are interesting.
Dating apps are interesting and like uh that's pretty interesting. I never heard of that scenario where someone just posted a bunch of pics of them in like in front of in rich scenes and then people assume that they're rich, which goes to a point like you can post whatever you want on there and it can be completely false. And for some other people, like I feel like me as a human being, like when I'm in person with someone, I'm much more vibrant, much more, I don't know. I feel more like I can represent myself better and have a better social scenario. And that goes, I mean, it depends because you get like I saw this meme. It was really funny. It was like it was showing like one person who's very desperate and one person who's like not desperate at all. And one is like nerds on dating apps versus women on dating apps. And then the women are not like desperate and the nerds are very desperate. And then the next was nerds on LinkedIn and then recruiters on LinkedIn. And then it went back to like the females being recruiters. And I guess that's pretty sexist in itself. But I thought it was pretty funny because it's like the same person and the same people on two different platforms with two different purposes. And it's just interesting because one, I've also seen another meme where it's like it shows the same person in 6 different scenarios.
Mhm.
And one is like me on Instagram. The next one's like, but then it's like them just like in a social scene. The next one's me on LinkedIn. And then it's them with a suit. And then the next one's like me on, I don't know, dating apps. And then it's them in a bikini. And it's like, okay, this is like kind of
The new social circles in a sense.
new social circles and like this just weird uh like I do this too where you think you're on a date, like not a dating app, but you're on a social app and like you're just in this social app.
Yeah.
And then you're not, this doesn't affect your LinkedIn. You know,
Yeah.
what you put on your Tinder isn't going to affect what you put on your LinkedIn. And like what you put on your LinkedIn is not going to affect how, you know, you go on Twitter or Instagram. And it's like for me with this podcast, like I use a tool called Buffer, which just you post it on Buffer and it posts to all the other social medias, which I like because I don't have to go onto social medias to post. But I've kind of realized that like separation of personalities across these different platforms is a little strange, and I haven't really adhered to it the way that I feel the general public does.
Yeah. It's a really good point. I never even thought of that because you're right. Like you definitely in each app you like act or socialize differently based on the app because of how it or what it's created for, right? Um, so yeah, it's interesting. I never thought about that.
And the marketing is way different, and like who you're marketing yourself to, like LinkedIn, you're marketing yourself to like a recruiter and other people in your network, and then dating apps, you're marketing yourself to like potential significant others.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting. Never really thought about that. That kind of going back to that book I was talking about. That they were talking a lot about like the other part of that, which is separate from what we're talking about, but kind of interconnected, of like your idea of love and where that comes from. A lot of it's like based on movies and based on like really based on movies, like and
Yeah,
how
movies.
like he was talking about in his book, for example, how he did this whole grand proposal to his wife and like had like this a cappella group and had like a horse waiting and like it was overlooking a river. I was guilty of it too. I put like there was a very nice proposal for Lexi. But I think that's like what you expect people want. Knowing Lexi, I don't think she needed anything too grand. I think she just needed to be asked, right? But similar with his wife, he said the same thing. He's like, I thought that's what she wanted, and then I realized like she was allergic to horses, and I didn't even really put this proposal together for her. It was more so for me and what I think love I thought was. So I just thought it was interesting. Like never looked at it that way because you have this idea and it's all based on past experiences or like movies or whatever it may be, books. So yeah, I don't know. Interesting. It's not related to what we were talking about, but it's kind of related in a sense. But anyways,
It's kind of related, and I mean that's it kind of goes to social media because in a
Yeah.
sense it's kind of what you see now. It's instead of like I spend much more time on social media than I do on watching movies, and I think most people our age are the same. So now instead of seeing that with movies, it's like, okay, I just saw, John Carl Smith proposing to his wife on the coast of
Yeah.
frickin'
Yeah,
Italy in front of like this, like, whatever.
for sure.
That's the new thing. Or, you just see like John Jefferson went to like Thailand for the fifth time in 2 years, and you're
Yeah.
just like, oh, we got to go to Thailand now.
Yeah. It's like that's formulating your idea of what you think you should be, whether it's a proposal, whether it's, uh, yeah, keeping up with the Joneses. It's like the new way of keeping up with the Joneses. It's not really communicating it. It's more so like, I got to post about it, right? I got to show people that I'm at this place because this person did that. I don't know.
Yes. And one of the biggest ones, although I love eating at restaurants, nice restaurants, I feel like one of the biggest ones of that is like
Food.
posting food. Like,
Yeah.
especially if it's an expensive meal, then it's like posting that expensive meal. And I like expensive meals occasionally, like especially if they're well made and the service is fantastic. I like that a lot. Um, but again, like I don't know what to say because you also don't want like there is a little bit of a fallacy, and I I'm Persian, and so there's this thing called like the Islamic paradise, and you know there's this idea of this wonderful world that's going to exist if people do XYZ, and if they just do X and they do Y and they do Z and then they avoid A, B, C and don't do those things, then we'll all live in this paradise. And it's not true. I find it to be very not, I don't believe it. And people like to show off.
Mhm.
And I don't think they're going to stop anytime soon.
No.
And for us, though, I think one of the reasons being off of Instagram, being off of Twitter, doing that is important is so that we don't have to expose ourselves to like, again, and I go back to this like those social apps, whether it be LinkedIn or Tinder, because like when you're exposed to that, and say you see like, dude, I mean, for a guy who really is like lonely and wants a girlfriend, and then he scrolls through Twitter and sees like 100 beautiful girls in like 10 minutes, and then none of them match on him.
Yeah.
That's the depressing thing. Like
It makes you more like, why am I not good enough for whatever?
anyone.
Yeah.
And it's a false sense of lack of accomplishment, a false sense of like not accomplishing something, because like it's really marketing your profile. Like it's more than that. It's not about who you are as a person. It's not about your like the quality of your character. It's about like what pictures do you have? How good do you look in these pictures? What are you doing in these pictures? And like that can all be just completely fabricated.
Yeah, 100%. I think yeah, it's very, I don't know, it's very scary to think about that. And I think also, to your point about that, is I think that's why it's so important to surround yourself around types of things that you want others to be like, that you want. Say if you're looking for a girlfriend, for example, or that is interested in fitness or whatever. It's like, why don't you go to the gym and like maybe try to find that, or be around the social circle that potentially could happen. So that way you're like surrounding yourself around those types of people and then meeting those types of people. Because I think because of all of the social media stuff and lack of connection now, I feel like people don't go do those things and they're seeking for it on Tinder or whatever it may be. And it's like, I don't know, organically meeting people, I feel like that stories that never really happens anymore. You don't hear it as much, at least, but I still feel like it happens. And you can make it happen based on who you surround yourself with. But I think a lot of people are just, I don't know, a lot of people do seek companionship, understandably. But I think if they're okay and content with themselves, and this is coming from me who I've always been in a relationship, so it's easier for me to say. But like going back to that book that we were talking about, right? A lot of it's like, hey, love yourself first. And if you do things on your own, then I think those things will come naturally if you surround yourself in the right circles, whatever. It's one of the reasons why I respect you a lot. Like you do a lot of things on your own and like don't really need to be around people, or like in this big thing, you know, you do a lot of things for yourself, which I appreciate and respect. Same with Adam, my friend Adam, that you met. He's the same way. Like he's very independent and he'll go on trips by himself and do this. And that's something I never could do and something I'm like challenging myself to do. But I don't know, I got in a whole rant, but all that to say, surrounding yourself around the right circles, I think is important. And the people, right people, I think is important. I was listening to a podcast this morning that they were talking about that. It's like, if you are around a group of friends and you think that you're like the most, like you're the leader of the group or whatever it may be, then that's an issue because you're not surrounding yourself around the right people that want to help level you up, if that makes sense. And I thought that was very true.
That's a huge, I agree with that. And I think that can be scary, but also I think it's, you know, if you want to change, if you want to grow, then we spoke about this before, weak connections versus strong connections.
Mm-hmm.
Like you and I, we have a strong connection. We're very good friends. We text often, but then you and I, we already have our strong connection and we've maintained it because I feel we have a mutually beneficial relationship and we both enjoy each other's company. Whereas we both have had to shed other relationships where we feel they're not mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
And that goes to, earlier I was brought up this YouTube audiobook from the 40s. I forgot, The Strangest Secret by Earl Nightingale. And he speaks about kind of what you just said. It's understanding what you really want and thinking about it all the time and realizing that there are other things that you might want, but they contradict what you really want.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes to like what you said. Say, a guy is looking for, a potential significant other, girlfriend, and he wants, he's really into fitness. Well, and, would like someone who's also into fitness. Well, going to the gym is probably the best place instead of the bars.
Yeah.
Like if you meet someone at the bar, you should expect that they enjoy going to bars and they enjoy drinking. And it's really going to be, I mean, if you're expecting like a fitness guru to be going to the bar, like they're usually not there.
For sure. And that goes back to like the whole, what we've talked about is like the drinking culture in the past. How I feel like people expect and think that's the only way to meet people. But it's not. And there's so many other ways. And like if the yoga, for example, if you're trying to work on your own mental health, going to a yoga studio, or whatever it may be, spin class or whatever, something that helps you. But I think a lot of people, I don't know, might blame other things and see that, hey, I'm not getting matches with anybody, so I'm going to blame that I'm not the problem. It's everybody else, or not looking themselves. If that makes sense. Inward, and instead, like, think about all the reasons why it didn't work and blame everybody else or everything else. I don't know, or just be depressed and upset about why it didn't work. Um,
It's very easy to do. I
yeah,
think it's like a natural human intuition to blame other people and be depressed,
yeah,
but it sucks. It's a
yeah,
very terrible state of mind. And that, I mean, like when we say this, that people should attempt to do this, I feel like you and I were mostly speaking to ourselves
hmm,
because we know that this is like a better life where we feel less burdened by nonsense.
yeah,
And like, as long as we're able to do that, look inward, because it goes back to like stoicism, stoic practice. It's like there's a lot of things you can't control.
yeah,
And obsessing about those things, like people who complain in the office, I mean, I just get so over it so
yeah.
quickly. It's like
They complain about everything.
they complain about everything as if there's like just a few things. Like, one, you don't have a choice. Two, you're taking this paycheck. Three, like, you can stop taking the paycheck. And four, like, I don't know what to say, but like, why complain about it?
Yeah,
Go.
I agree. No, I'm right there with you. I I feel like it's funny because I feel like there are people who do that, and then they're kind of looked at as like the people who are trying to change things in a good way. I don't. They're somehow looked at in a good light. Like, I guess that's what I've always looked at it. It's like they're challenging the status quo, but like I'm just like, hey, if they're telling me to do something, like I'm just gonna do it, and I might not agree, but like it is what it is. Also, I think having worked at other places, you see how other places have operated, and it makes you appreciate like how good things are in your current scenario. I think that's kind of my philosophy or thought on it. But yeah, I agree. Going back to your point, it's like you're wasting your energy. Like, either quit or
Yes.
stop complaining and just do the job. Um, I don't know.
Wasting your energy is like what you just said. That's it. It's like it might suck, it might be crap, but like exactly stoicism, wasting your energy. You're either going to take that paycheck or you're not going to take the paycheck.
For sure. Or go find a new job. Like, it's pretty simple. Like, if you're going to complain about everything, then go find a new job. Nobody's making you work here. Like you said, you're taking the paycheck.
Yes. And I mean, yes, it's easy to complain, and I definitely am at fault of complaining, but I don't know. It's just some people love to complain about just not just work, but like everything. Like a bad person on the road, or
Yeah.
just like it just is a lifestyle more so than a mind state.
Do you think those types of people are pushing blame on others and not taking accountability for whatever's going on in their own life, so they like have to like pay attention to what stuff they can't control, to your point of like not being stoic? I don't know if that makes sense, but
I think so because I can recognize those instances in myself.
mhm,
And so most of the experiences, like unspoken human experiences that I've had, and I've heard most of them I find are not that unique to me. And they're actually very general, and many people experience that. So sometimes, like, I have found myself in a argument, maybe not like an actual like emotionally based argument, but like maybe it is an emotionally based argument, but I'm arguing one point, this other person's arguing this other point, and then they actually say something that is like credible, very credible, and debatably puts my point like into the dirt, and I'll still argue my point. And I can recognize this as I'm doing it. I'm like, Jesus, I'm only doing this because I don't want to be wrong.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, like, and I put a lot of time into cultivating the awareness to even recognize that, oh man, like I'm just doing this because like this is a defense from like me having to prove that I've been wrong for the last like 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think other people do that. And then you had a second point. What was that?
We went off on a tangent, so I forgot.
I forgot too.
The
You
first
asked, go
ahead.
You asked if people,
Oh,
if I,
yeah. If you think that's like a defense,
yes,
for the way in which they act, and if they're blaming everyone else and not taking accountability for their own actions and not being stoic.
that's second one. Yes. And for some people in the world, I do actually think they're given just a losing hand. Like,
Yeah.
There are a few people in this world. I don't think too many Americans, honestly. I think Americans, especially ones that have been here for many generations, like they don't recognize the amount of power and education they've been handed, especially on the global scale. But for like an impoverished person born in Bangladesh or Africa or like Mongolia, it's like if you're poor and born there, yeah, you've been dealt like a really, really tragic hand. And like, what?
I said for sure. I agree. That also, to that point, I also feel like that's everybody. I feel like a lot of people complain about America, but like we're so fortunate here, and I don't feel like anybody really understands. Like we literally hit the lottery being born here. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we have so much opportunity here. It's a free market. You can do whatever you want. It's all just based on what you put out, right? Whereas other countries, it's not the case. So yeah, I agree. Here we're very fortunate, but I feel like a lot of people feel like we're not. And obviously, there's scenarios that other people were dealt bad hands in America as well. So I'm not saying that, but
Yes,
in totality,
for sure.
for the most part, I would say we're fortunate for sure.
I think so. I think if you're able to make like, granted, living in this country, the cost of living in the US is way too high. It's like astronomically high, and that needs to be solved. But as a second generation Iranian American, there are people, there are Iranians who are my age in Iran and have zero opportunity. I mean, like nothing. And these people have college degree. Like Iran's like is a very well educated place, and they just have like no chance of like business. Like their government doesn't support them. Like, granted, our government does some shit, but they support the people. Like, I mean, they're not like some of these old world governments that like bring down the sword when things are going, yeah, like literally, like when things aren't going their way, and just to maintain some power. It's like the US, it's more obvious for me, whereas people who've been here for generations, like their family's been here for like 3, 4, 5, 6 generations, I can understand, because then you see things more like from the perspective of the baby boomers in the US, where like being a baby boomer in the United States, in my opinion, had to be one of the easiest lives in the world, because there was just a lot of opportunity. And one other thing to say, I feel like I mean, I don't know what means to be a struggling American because I really haven't been a struggling American. But in a lot of Western countries, it seems like struggling isn't as bad as it would be in non-Western countries, where like you literally, I don't know, dude. We have a lot of people on the streets who seem like they're very, very messed up. So I don't know if it's a mental health crisis or if it's an economic crisis or what
both.
it is, or both.
Yeah.
It's probably a combination of both.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's everyone that considers themselves a victim. I think
For sure.
some people are over victimizing themselves to a fault.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Especially the people that would listen to podcasts.
What do you mean?
Like if you're like in a very depressed state, homeless, on the streets in the US, addicted to drugs, you're probably not listening to like long form podcasts.
Yeah.
That would be my guess. Long form podcasts like these ones, like I Googled Cruise Koilu podcast and it's labeled as an education podcast now. So
do you have any say on that, or does who changes that, or who does that?
I don't know. It might have just been like a Google algorithm or something because it was on Google. And I think I originally had it. Maybe I did have it on education. I thought I had it on business, but now it's an education podcast and it's fairly long form. And like one of the podcasts I listen, and a lot of the ones I listen to are like educational, although I know people who like comedic podcasts.
Yeah.
But even comedic podcasts, I mean, like, it's still usually going to be listened to by someone who has like a 9 to 5 or has like a phone, a cell provider, the ability to like get Wi-Fi or cell service and put it on their phone. Granted, I mean, I feel like a lot of impoverished people can do this, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say. On that kind of note, I was talking to my dad, going back to like the whole. So here's the flip side of the whole opportunity and challenges and that you face. And obviously there's opportunity, but still in America there's issues, right? So my dad's from Memphis. He went back recently, and he got out when he left when he was like 12, and then he came to California and has been in California ever since. But going back, he's like, the people that are at home that I like looked up to are like not doing a whole lot with their lives, mainly because they didn't have like the right people to look up to see what they were doing and trying to advance their lives. And so they're kind of stuck in the same rut of doing the same things that their family did or friends around that area that didn't really ever leave. And I think that's one of the issues in a lot of like the impoverished areas, especially like south side of Chicago, for example. I would assume it's like there's not a lot of people that you could look up to, and you can say, oh yeah, this is someone that I like look up to as he did this. And I think that's, I don't know, it's an issue within America, I think, for sure. And it was just kind of interesting to hear my dad's perspective. It was like, man, if I would have stayed here, who knows like how my life would have ended up, because I looked up to all these people that I thought were X, Y, and Z, and I'm like at a way different place in my life than them. So he was fortunate in that he was able to move over to California, but I don't know, it's kind of interesting to think about. And it makes me feel very fortunate for the way I grew up, not having to really struggle and worry about things like others have in the past. I don't know. Makes you think about a lot of that stuff and just feel very fortunate for the way you were brought up.
Yes, and even with all the like online networking and social medias, like the people that you see in front of you still hold way more power
Yeah.
and way more influence on
Dude,
our lives. Okay.
Just trying to flip this here. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Yes, they hold way more. Speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Okay. And they still hold way more influence on our lives. And like, granted, like, I have to put this into perspective because I'm a very online, like, I utilize online platforms more than most people, especially as like a form of interconnection.
Mhm.
But I still feel, I don't know, because I've never been in one of those impoverished situations. I have been in like a fraternity and I have been on a football team. And even on those, when you're in those environments with those groups of people, you still have like social media, but like that social media is still from like the scope of what my immediate friends in my network are doing.
Yeah. There's not like outsiders' perspectives on it.
No. And so I'm guessing, for like impoverished young people in Memphis, Chicago, San Bernardino, Riverside, that's like one of the most deadly cities in America now. Um, it's not so easy to just be like, oh, let me hop on the computer and find some some inspiration for my life.
Yeah, because to your point, you're still surrounding your circle, still your circle. And yeah, there's information out there, and there's people that get out of those scenarios, of course. But for the most part, if you're only following or keeping in touch or looking at other people who are in the same scenario you're in, it's going to be hard to get out, harder.
Yes. Luckily, you and I, like you said, we were raised in Orange County, much different scenario. And with that, like, influence, able to just have a different standard of thinking. And with that different standard, we are what we think, like going back to Earl Nightingale, the secret, or the strangest secret, we are our thoughts. And so if someone's born impoverished, born in an area where there's a lot of crime and possibility of being killed as a young man, pretty high possibility of being killed as a young man, then most of your young life you're thinking like, how am I going to avoid getting killed? Fight or flight. And it's not a fight or flight like that I'm used to, which is like my type of fight or flight is more so like, hopefully I can churn out this work within the next 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
And that's a way different, like, just default thought pattern. And I don't know, when you have that, it's like that default thought pattern influences everything without it really being obvious.
Yeah. I mean, going back to that book I was talking about earlier, even if it's not about love, it's just in general, like that's what how you were raised and how you're born is formulates your whole idea of life, right? And your experiences and all those things. And so, yeah, you're absolutely right. Like your fight or flight is completely different from someone else's fight or flight that had to experience something completely different. Yeah, I don't know. It's wild. It's crazy to think about. You're talking about something earlier. We mentioned in Iran, it's very educational, but they don't have opportunity like we do here. Like, not super familiar with that. Can you like talk about that a little bit just from your experience? Like when you talk about like businesses or whatever it may be, like
what the differences are.
One difference I would say is, well, there's huge sanctions on Iran, and those sanctions are imposed by, the West.
Mhm.
So that's one thing, but also it's how the government manages the people. That's a huge deal. There are multiple instances of the government, the Islamic Republic of Iran, just, there's huge protests and people are killed. Thousands of people, hundreds of people, tens of people are killed. I mean, they're willing to take the sword, bring it down on the people with very little, um, and with very little, what's the word I'm looking for? Doubt. Not much like, ooh, is this the right thing? Not much hesitation. Whereas here in America, and then when the people start, getting very angry and start protesting, like we have a friend, Devin, who was on the podcast speaking about the Chilean riots, and he spoke about how, there was an atrocity on one side of Chile. That atrocity would be recorded, posted on Instagram, and then all of a sudden, everyone in Chile knew about what happened just, however many hours ago, and everyone was coordinating about how they're going to respond and protest to this one event. And in Iran, the government will just shut off the internet. And these types of things, shutting off the internet for an undisclosed amount of time. Imagine if that happened in the United States.
Yeah, people go wild.
People would go crazy. I mean, dude, I think some local law enforcements would go crazy. Like, it's just
can't function. You wouldn't be able to function.
Exactly. This is the government, and this is like an old world way of thinking. Like, China has this problem too. Governments are willing to just shut everything down in order to maintain authority and control.
Yeah.
And that is, I mean, that's just not a value we have in the US. That's not a value I think most Western countries have. Especially the Anglo ones. And when I say Anglo, I mean from the British Isles. That's what I one time said the word Anglo in a work environment, and everyone got like, whoa, he just said Anglo. Like, what did he mean? But Anglo and Germanic and Nordic, they're not the same thing. Anglo is from the British Isles, so from Great Britain or England. Germanic is from Germany, and Nordic is from like Norway, Sweden, and Scandinavia. So like, when I say Anglo, I mean pretty much any country that Great Britain went and colonized, which is US, Canada, New Zealand, Australia. And go
ahead.
And just like Anglo values are not the same as Germanic values, which I don't know much about Nordic values, but that's something that like, it's not very obvious to people. It's like Germany and the UK have had two major wars in the last like 110 years. And so like, just because they're the same race, which is white, doesn't mean that they have this similar value system. It's like British values are not exactly the same as mainland European values, and we as Americans were much more highly influenced from British values than we were from European values.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's interesting. And it's also like, part of the interesting thing about why a lot of people I think were scared about the COVID stuff, like shutting down, because like, regardless of whatever whatever side you land on, it's like that scary of potentially having a lack of freedom, which is what America's all about, right? So very interesting. I think that's why everybody went crazy on both sides, right? Because I don't know, sparked even more of a divide. Um, but anyways,
Yes.
yeah.
I personally like the divide because the divide, I think, is better than just blatant, we're going to do what the majority says and that's that, which is what happened in most other places in the world. Like, I don't know who I made this argument with, but the US, I feel one of the reasons that the post pandemic economy was really strong, or when I say that the currency maintained its strength in the face of everyone else's currency or most other countries' currencies, is because half of the country did not shut down
Yeah,
during that time. Like, most of the South was open. Most of the Midwest was open, right?
for the most part, other than like big cities like Chicago. But yeah, for the most part.
And same with like the mountainous regions up there. Like, most places, especially, or at least 50% of the places, which are important spots because those are not, I mean, a lot of white collar workers are concentrated in urban environments. So the rural environments have, I would say, more blue collar workers and possibly more need for like hands on work. I have no idea. That's kind of an assumption. But I do think that division actually created a spot where like our economy was able to maintain more of its strength because a larger majority of our workforce just ignored the not ignored, but just didn't shut down the way that a majority of the world did.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with. I mean, when you put it that way, yes, I agree. The division's good in that sense. I think like the hate is what I don't love, especially because I feel like, and maybe it's just the circles that I am around and the people that I surround myself around or have similar thoughts and values to me. I feel like for the most part, most of who I interact with is like in the middle, or maybe they just don't want to say how they feel. So maybe that's part of it. But um, I don't feel like there's as much of a divide as we feel, mainly because social media, like you just see a lot of that on both sides, and I think it riles everybody up. I think a lot of America's in the middle. I guess, sorry, I don't want to say a lot of America. A lot of our generation is in the middle. I can't say
Dude,
that
you've
for others.
you've been out of California for a long time.
Yes,
There's
I
a
have.
lot of diehard liberals, a lot of diehard liberals
I know that, and I'm aware
that
of
are our age.
Yes, I'm familiar with that. But you're right. You're absolutely right. Like I have left that circle for a long time, so maybe I'm not as aware. But also, to your point, to counter your point, you're also in California. You know what I mean? So it's like you've only seen a lot of that, where I've seen a lot of that, but I've also seen other things and like people being in the middle and people being on the other side, right? So, um, yeah, but it really is territorial and like where you're at. Like Chicago is obviously very liberal because it's a big city. So I'm around that, but then I'm around people who are not super in the middle. And it's like, I don't know. But yeah, it's a good point.
It's Yes, I mean, state sovereignty is huge. And I
Yeah.
argued this yesterday with someone, or 2 days ago, that, like, we as Californians, we may have this like idea of how Alabamans should live and how Mississippians should live, but like, sure, do we want to impose those beliefs on them so that in turn they impose their beliefs on us? And
Yeah.
then it's like, and then we bring up like, how far does that sort of state sovereignty go? Because, slavery, like, you just let them be, slave owners, like they have
Yeah.
state sovereignty. Like, there's a certain
Yeah.
line, obviously, there. But it's still, we're not at the point of slavery. It's not even close. And, people are very passionate about the abortion topic. And I would say that is probably the most impassioned argument for not allowing state sovereignty right now is that blue states want to allow abortion federally. And I'm, we're in this blue state, so this is a very pro-choice state, and I align with my state on that. And, but at the same time, I question, do we really need to have an opinion on these states that, like, frankly, I don't know any Alabamans.
Yeah.
I don't know any people from Mississippi. I do know a few Louisianans, and I know a few people from Tennessee. I don't know anyone from Kentucky. I don't know many Georgians. Like, I don't know many people from like Kansas and Nebraska. And so, like, do I need to like
Have an
determine
opinion based on their
exactly
values that you don't really align with or know anything about, right?
And Californians, I mean, we have lived in a state. I mean, I'll bring this up again and again and again until there's a decriminalization of cannabis at the federal level, because, Californians will talk, oh, I can't believe, Supreme Court rescinded abortion rights. What I can't believe is how the 1970 Controlled Substance Act is still a legal document, and how that hasn't been rescinded just from the state of cannabis legality in the US. Like, cannabis is legal in 19 states as well as the capital, District of Columbia. Hell, psychedelic mushrooms are legally sold in the District of Columbia, and yet it's a federal crime. And this is like, talk about a complete like, I don't know, like, this is something that I find great passion for. And I think that, we as Californians, especially me being born in 1993 and having had medical cannabis legal here since 1996, which is 27 out of the 30 years of my life, I just find it as like, it's not just crazy, it's just a overreaching hand of the federal government over state government rights.
Yeah, and that doesn't really make sense. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. That's a whole other rabbit hole that you can go down. That's an interesting one.
It's just an example of how
sure.
Californians, especially being such a highly, like, we make a lot of money. California alone could be the 6th largest economy. Granted, California doesn't have its own military, so that's like kind of like, it's just a weird thing to say. But either way, the state makes a lot of money, and it should care about its state sovereignty more than it does. But I think because we make a lot of money, we feel as though we should have more power over the rest of the country.
Just become your own country. Just kidding.
Dude, I don't think that, Californians say that, but actually, going back to what I just mentioned, we don't have a military.
Yeah.
And military isn't a high value in California. Like, Californian engineers don't go out and say, oh, I want to work for the, I want to go work for the Department of Defense. I want to go be a defense contractor. No, they say we want to go.
Oh, the East Coast, right?
It's something like that. South, East Coast, Midwest. And so, like, we just go out, build tech, do these insane companies. But what I don't think Californians realize is we do this on the backs of the U.S. military. Like, we don't worry about property rights. We don't worry about getting invaded. We don't worry about, like, losing our homes. We just worry about building insane tech, because we have a military that guards the property rights and just says, we'll allow these crazy nerds to do whatever they want because they make great things, and then they're able to tax it.
Yeah. It's a very good point. I don't think of that either. But that makes sense. Switching gears. One thing I've been thinking about a lot is recently, especially as I'm going into this next phase of my life of getting married in 12 days, which is wild.
Very wild.
Um, Going on 30 as well. It's like we're getting to this point where our parents are starting to get older, and we're going to start having to take care of our parents. Like not like it's going to be very soon that it'll like all of a sudden hit us, right?
Yes.
And it's like we're eventually going to get to that point where we thought our parents were when we were young, like we thought they were this holy grail, like they knew everything, and like we're still going to this. We're going to be these naive. We're going to still be naive and learn a lot of things along the way, but we're going to be smarter than we were. But obviously, still have. We're not going to have all the answers still, right? So, but we're going to be 40s. We're going to be have kids potentially if you do have kids, and your kids are going to look up at you like you're this like like you're the best thing since sliced bread, and then you realize that you don't really know anything. It's just crazy because we're going through that transition of life where we're going to start becoming our parents, and our parents are going to become grandparents, and our parents are becoming older, and then eventually like we're not even going to have our parents. It's just very like it's just a wild time that I've like started to reflect a lot on, just because of going into that next phase of my life, if that makes sense. And it's been a very interesting moment of reflection over the past couple of weeks or so, I'd say.
How are you feeling about it?
Feeling good about it. Like I'm feeling content about it. Like I'm very, very lucky, I'll say. Like I still have both of my parents, and I still have all my family around. So like I'm fortunate that they're going to be there for me on an important day of my life. So I think that's all very positive. But it's still just a very, it's a scary thing to think about, right? That eventually we're going to be those people that have to have all the answers for the younger generation, like our parents do, or like my parents do. Like I still ask my mom stuff about my insurance sometimes because she just knows that stuff, and I'm just like, hey, question about this, like blah blah blah, and I'm gonna have to know those things. You know what I mean? I'm gonna have to answer those things for Mike, and it's like I haven't really come to grips with that yet, because I've always been lucky enough to fall back on that and like have my family there for me to answer some of those more difficult questions or things, or how they navigated certain things in their life, and then to be that one that has to have those answers. I wouldn't say has to have those answers, but feel like you are the one that's going to help others have answers. I think is just it's a scary thought, like, but it's also exciting at the same time. I don't know how to explain it. So I think this is when I think of when I was younger, I always like this is what I always thought I wanted to be at in my life. Like I wanted to be at a place where I'm finally stable emotionally, in a relationship, stable relationship, financially stable. I don't know if I said that already. And then also just, yeah, I think those are the three core things, like emotionally stable, financially stable, and a like really solid, stable relationship. So those are three core things that I've always wanted going into marriage. And I've always thought I would just like kind of stay there. And now I'm realizing as you're getting older, like that's just one small bit of your life, and it's going to continue to go, and you're going to get older. And I don't know. It's just like it's just making me think more about the progress of how life is going to unfold. I think that's just very interesting. It's
What are
hard to
some
like,
other bits?
well, like, you become a kid, or you have kids, and then you become a dad and become parents, and then your kids go off into their life, and you become empty nesters again, and then you have like a different phase of your life where you're like older and you're more mature, and your kids are out of the house, and you have like time for yourselves again, but you're 60, 65-ish, and so you're going through a different phase of your life. I don't know. It's like stuff like that that you don't really ever think about. Um, but that also goes back to, I think I texted you about this. I was in a Uber in Milwaukee, and I met this 70-year-old man who probably looked like he was 50. Like he looked phenomenal. And I don't remember what he told me. He's like, "Oh yeah, it's my 70th birthday in a day or two." And I was like, "Oh wow, you look like you're 50 or whatever." And he's like, "Yeah, my friends and I, we bike every single day. My wife does ballet. We always make sure to walk and eat very healthy, and it's very important as we age to continue to do those things." So it just kind of made me think of like the longevity of life, and like someone like that can be in such a great mental and physical shape, whereas somebody also the same age can be deteriorating.
Dude, someone half that age could be
Yeah,
deteriorating.
for sure. So it's interesting, I guess, to just think about that. And you're like, we're at this phase where I think things can go this way, or they can go this way, or they can just stay flat. And it's really all about how you choose to kind of navigate that. And I think that's more so
Yes.
what I've been thinking about long term, of like, okay, there's different paths that you can take, and what path are you going to take, I guess.
And I mean, we've spoken about it multiple times, like being in shape, what that means. We spoke about this over text, I think, too, that the old people that seem the most senile and the most like aware of the current situation are the ones that maintain a active lifestyle. Like I've met, I 65 plus year old, 80-year old, those they were like sharp. Like this 80 plus year old was like a sharp guy, looked, as sharp as a 60-year old, maybe a person in their late 50s. And then the 65-year old I met, seemed as sharp as someone, who was in his early 40s, late
Yeah.
40s. And that's a huge deal. Like, even if you like, and I mean, personally, I love being in shape. Like,
Yeah.
it's just way better. Like, just approaching any situation and being in shape, you feel better. You're able to be more confident, approach everything with more confidence, and just be like less questioning, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think about, for me also, like it's a way of like mental health too. Like I need a few moments of just like movement to feel good, like mentally. Like I'm
Yeah.
like walking. Like walking is huge. Getting steps huge. And like I don't know, it's a sacrifice that we
Yeah.
have to commit, but I think at the end of the day, it's really worth it. And I mean, it's obviously worth it.
You feel way better.
Yes.
And yeah, just doing hard things, you feel better. Um, hard
And this
things.
is a relatively easy, hard thing.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I don't know. It made me think a lot about just like, the trajectory. And I think it really starts post college, right? The small decisions and how those over time start to formulate the way your life goes and is. And it's like we can start making those impactful decisions now, to put us in a place where when we're 50, 60, we're better off. Because eventually we are going to be our parents are going to pass, and we're going to be the people that our children look up to and our families look up to. And don't you want to be in the best position possible to, I don't know. I think about a lot of those different things, especially for me, just starting a family and thinking about being like the leader, or like of the household, and like just making sure my family is in a good spot, right? I think a lot about that is like, how can I make sure that I'm doing everything I can to help make things the best possible way that they can be, whether it's financially, putting my kids in a good school, whatever it may be, right? A lot of different things come to mind, but
Do you know who Ray Dalio is?
yes.
In his book Principles, he had this one part that said, if you're worrying, there's no need to worry. And if you're not worrying, you should worry. And I think about that like with this, because I know some men who just had a baby, just happened. They just had a child, and then it's just like they're 9 months later, it's born, and then they have a baby. Whereas you know, you're thinking, how am I going to bring a human being into this world and provide for it? And
Mhm.
that sort of upfront planning is very, I mean, it just puts you in the thought process to be there. Whereas if you just, have,
Not prepared for it.
yeah, and you just have sex with someone and then impregnate them, and then 9 months later, a child is born. You didn't put any thought into that, and so like we've talked earlier, the 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 strangest secret by Earl Nightingale. The strangest secret, and for him, is we are our thoughts. So you preparing, thinking about how am I going to prepare for this,
Yeah.
provide, be the breadwinner, have provide education, shelter, food. I mean, then you are your thoughts. So you're eventually going to be a dad versus like someone who has a child and then doesn't think about it at all. It's like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that's going to
No,
be a tough life.
yeah, I agree. And I mean, we've all kind of seen those scenarios happen. And I think some overcome those very well, I will say, and some don't, but I think, yeah, I talk about this with Lexi all the time, just like planning. It's like, I don't want to just live year by year, right? Like, I don't want to just like, okay, well, let's just renew this lease right now. And then I'm like, no, we got to start planning for like what's going to happen, because I don't want to be in a position where we're not prepared for something to happen and we're just doing things out of convenience. Like, we got to start thinking about our lives and financially, and if we want to potentially bring a kid into this world, like, what does that mean, and where should we live, and if all those things. So I think like I'm always sitting on the side doing research of different states that have houses that are affordable and places that have new construction homes and schools and all that stuff, like best lives that you could live in our age. So I'm always like thinking about those things constantly, just to make sure that we're preparing ourselves, so we're not just going with the flow and, oh, if it happens, it happens. Like, I don't want to live like that. I want to make sure that I'm giving my best effort to make sure that my family's set up for success, long term.
And that's very risky, going with
Yeah.
the flow.
Yeah. I mean, we could do that in our 20s, right? Early 20s, because you don't really have a ton of responsibility outside of just living and making an income, right? But then you start to realize, all right, we're getting older. Time is not going to last forever like we thought it was when we were early 20s, right? And I think you start to realize, like, we got to start doing things now, or else we're going to get to a place where we're out of time. So yeah, I agree. It's very risky living day by day or month by month or year by year, however you want to phrase it.
Yes. And I'm glad we're not living like that.
Yeah, agreed. It also goes to our friendship too. I think we're both very similar in talking about those things, and trying to prepare our lives to be as successful as possible and as I don't want to say worry free, but trying to avoid the things that could cause you or I don't want to say inconveniences, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? Like the things that are unexpected. It's like, let's plan for those things so they're not unexpected. And so we're putting ourselves in a better position.
Yes, absolutely. Michael, are there any last words or last thoughts you'd like to leave the audience before we end today?
No. Well, this is number 6. Is that right?
Yes.
It's pretty crazy. It's exciting. I think every time we come on, I feel like it gets better just with your conversational aspect. So it's pretty cool to see you from podcast 1 to now. Yeah, I'm excited for you. But other than that, no, I have nothing else to say. Except for I'm excited to see you in 12 days or less than 12 days.
Yes, excited to see you and Lexi get married very soon.
Looking forward to it. It's crazy. Can't believe it's already here. But it's about damn time because it's been a long time planning. So I'm looking forward to the day being here for sure.
Me too. My guest today has been Michael Carroll. Thanks for coming on the podcast, Michael.
Thanks, Krish.